I thought that I would begin by doing kind of my best to talk about why I think we're here. See, there's sort of, in my mind, there's why I think we're here, there's why you think you're here, and then there's why we're really here, which we may never know. But I can only speak to my bit. So for a number of years, okay, I'll go back. When I was born, not that far back. When I first had what I can only call an epiphany about the nature of humans, that we were born whole. Now, by the way, this is all stuff you've read in books, well, mine or other people's. I'd read it in books, I just didn't realize it was true. Like that was the epiphany. It wasn't like, oh my God, people think. It was like, oh my God, people actually do think. You know, it wasn't like, oh, we're made of light and life and intelligence. It was like, oh, we're actually made of life and light and intelligence. And that was the epiphany. The epiphany was that everything in the books was saying was actually true. Not everything. Some of the stuff in the books sounds crazy to me still. But that bit that I could see, that there was so much more to us than most of us got to experience on a regular basis. And that we get caught up in these crazy cultural rabbit holes. Like my dogs are diggers, and they are comical diggers. I mean, not if they're on your lawn, then they're, but in my world, they're comical pesky diggers, because they spot a gopher hole, and they're like, you know, nose down, and you know, Pepper, who's about this big, you know, will get down so far that, you know, his profile is like, but the problem is they don't actually catch anything. And I actually have video footage of one of my dogs, I think it was actually Mishka, who was an earlier dog, head all the way down the hole with the gopher popped up behind his back legs, looking up at him like, dude, I'm right here. Right? And that's what we do. We get caught down these gopher holes, these rabbit holes of the mind. And we really think we're working on stuff that has nothing to do with what we're actually looking for. And so for me, I have always been looking for a deeper understanding of that for myself, but then how on earth do you share that? How on earth do you talk about that in a way that people don't go, oh yes, good point, or oh, I don't think so, but actually have an experience for themselves of the truth of it, whatever that truth is. And that's what we're playing with for the next 3 days, is what is the truth of who we are at core, of what we have going for us. And how does that play out in the world? How does that play out in the way we perform in the world? How does that play out in the way that we create in the world? How does it play out in the way we relate with others in the world? How does it play out in the way we are within ourselves in the world? And my sort of favorite word for that core, that intelligence, that aliveness, is genius. And genius, the reason I like the word for a few reasons. I like it because in its original form, it comes from jinn, genie, not jinn like, I like it because it reminds me of jinn. No, jinn like the genie, like, you know. And it has that kind of magical quality to it, that it's sort of how things, like what if there really is a genie inside? And again, I get you can take that metaphor places that aren't what I mean. But it's that sort of magical quality where it's almost real and not quite real, and it sort of bridges the two worlds. And that's what life is, it seems to me. It is a bridge between two worlds that are made of the same stuff, the world of the formless that which is before we come into solidness, and the world of the form. But they're not really two worlds. They're just like, this is what this invisible energy looks like when it comes into form. And it doesn't look like anything before it comes into form. That's kind of what formless means. But it's the same stuff. And it turns out that sensitizing ourselves to it, getting eyes for it, does us a world of good. Because it's difficult to rely on something that we can't see, hear, taste, touch, or smell, and half the people are telling us doesn't exist, and the other half of the people are giving us the rules that you have to follow in order to have any communication with it whatsoever. And to my mind, those are gopher holes, right? Those are places we can spend years digging. We can dig into our psyches. We can dig into our past. We can dig into the rules and whys and wherefores of our cultural mores. But what we're looking for is sitting there behind our high legs going, hello, I'm here, it's me. You looking for me? Whatever, right? And that's what these 3 days are going to be about, is we're going to explore. So I suspect, and particularly in the next 20 minutes or so, I'm going to say some things that might almost sound worth taking notes on. And you can. I mean, nobody's going to take away your pen. But it isn't the point. Because any words that I give, any models that I put out, are just my clumsy attempts to put enough clothes on the invisible man that you might catch a glimpse. Right? The clothes aren't the invisible man, right? All the bandages, if you've ever seen the movies. It's more like, I can't remember in which of the movies. I used to love the Invisible Man movies, but in one of the movies, like you can sort of sense him in the steam room, or like running through water, you know, and so you don't quite see as much as when they put the hat on and the bandages and the coat. So that's what we're going to be trying to do, is put some clothes on the invisible genius that is already present, so that we get more of a sense for it. We start to recognize it. We start to see it doesn't go anywhere. Even when we feel hopefully out of touch with it, it is always at the core of what's going on, because it is what's going on. One of the metaphors you'll hear a lot from me and other people who talk about this kind of stuff is, it's like gravity. Well, what do we mean it's like gravity? Well, so some of you will have seen I did some podcasts and blog posts about, we called the 5 hashtags of innate genius, right? And it came from just sort of a running joke in the company, which was anytime one of us would do something that we thought was cool and not the kind of thing we were normally good at, like I would do a math problem correctly, you know, or you know, somebody who doesn't think of themselves as a teacher would get up and teach and it would go really well, or there would be some ridiculous tech problem and we'd figure it out. It was like, hashtag genius is infinite. And it did just start as a kind of a fun joke, but actually it's kind of the point. It's not like the conventional model which says, I am good at these things. I have a genius for these things. I am average at these things, and I am terrible at these things. So we design our lives around avoiding the things we're terrible at and kind of muddling through the things we're okay at, but try and design our lives around the things we have genius for. But that's personal. That's you. Genius itself is available where it's portable. It's not only available in certain situations for certain people, in the same way that gravity is infinite. Gravity doesn't switch off when you're doing math and switch back on when you're doing what you're good at. Or if you're good at math, you know, the opposite, right? Like, you know, it's not like, God, there's so much less gravity when I'm dating. Right? I mean, we get, that can't be right. But we think it is here. Oh, well, yeah, this, you know, there's no genius around that. Well, there is. It's just we're more or less in tune with it in those areas where we struggle. Another characteristic, genius is impersonal. Right? We kind of take pride in our genius or shame ourselves in the light of the genius of others, right? As if there's any difference. But again, substitute gravity, right? You don't have less gravity than somebody with a higher IQ. You don't have more gravity than somebody with a lower IQ. You don't have less gravity than somebody with more money. You don't have more gravity than somebody with less money, right? You don't have, people who do things we think are good in the world don't get more gravity than people we think are bad people. It's just gravity. It's not about us. And that's really good because then we don't have to spend our energy down the gopher hole of earning it, deserving it. Right? Nobody deserves gravity, but we all get it. Right? Nobody deserves genius, but we all get it. Nobody earns gravity, but we all get it. Nobody earns genius. It's just built into the system. It's just a part of who we are. Genius is responsive. So sometimes, I've had dialogues with people on trainings like this, and they go, well, okay, if I have genius, then I should know stuff. And then it stops, right? Or occasionally it becomes an epic list that you have to go, dear God, stop. But that's, again, that's thinking that genius is a data dump. No, that's intellect. That's memory, right? Cool, helpful, nothing to do with what we're talking about, right? A newborn baby has a responsive intelligence in it. It will adapt as best it can to its environment. A soldier in a war will adapt to what's going on in its environment. A business person trying to solve a problem at work, that's when we start to notice it because it's responsive. Bless you. We don't notice it till we need it. So we just think, well, it can't be there. But actually, it is. It's just sitting there between your hind legs waiting. And as soon as there's a need, it's right there. I use an analogy in one of my books of a magical cupboard. That if you look at it just to make sure, is there food in there? Is there food in there? Is there food in there? There's never any food in there. But when you need food, exactly the food you need is right in there. It's responsive to what is needed. It is adaptive. It is what allows us to respond and adapt. But because we don't trust it, most of the time we go to the data dump and we go, well, now what do smart people do in situations like this? What are the 5 best practices for dating? What are the 16 ways to solve tech problems? Because we don't realize that this responsive genius is just waiting for it to be given something to respond to. It's like playing a game of warmer, colder, right? If you never move, it never says. Right? Well, I've been sitting here waiting for genius to guide me, but I haven't heard a thing. I'm 40, right? Well, if you take one step in a direction, warmer, colder. Warmer, it's responsive. When we are engaged, it comes to us. It's a built-in feedback system. But if we're not doing anything, we're not going to be terribly aware of it because there's nothing for it to respond to. And so we don't realize that genius is reliable. We all pretty much, most people I talk to, if we spend any time going through, can think of a few times in their life where just something came to them from out of the blue. A solution to something, a next step to something, an opportunity, a possibility that they literally could never have planned for or thought of. Like one of my favorites was when we moved here, and my wife and I moved from England 20 years ago, and we thought we were going to take 6 months and learn LA and decide which part of LA we'd like to settle in, and we had a plan. It was a really pretty plan. And we arrived in 2000 during the storms. This was back when it used to rain in Southern California. And the place that we'd rented at great expense from England leaked. But it didn't just leak, it leaked wherever we moved the baby's crib. Like it seemed to follow. It was extraordinary. It was like a Russian guided missile of rain, you know. And so we were like, this is not good. This is not what we signed up for. What are we going to do? And we didn't have any idea of where to live, what to do. We were kind of panicking and trying to think our way through it. And then what happened was we went for a test drive of a car because we needed a car. And they drove by a house that had a for sale sign. And we're like, that looks pretty. And we went, and it wasn't actually great for us, but the person who showed us the house said, you know, you guys are from Europe. There's a very European neighborhood near here. And the twists and turns, you know, my wife and her mom go into this house, and there being the sound of a large dog barking on the other side, and the realtor's key not working to let them in to view it, and then getting a call over the weekend that, hey, you know that house we couldn't get into, they just dropped the price $100,000. Do you want to try and see it on Monday? And then 6 weeks after we got off the plane, that was our home, and that was our home for 20 years. We just, until August of last year, that's where we lived. You couldn't plan that, but you can actually rely on it. That once you're in the game, all sorts of things start to occur to you and around you to help you. And when you start to see that, you have a confidence walking forward into the unknown, because you know as you walk forward, you'll start hearing warmer, colder. As you move forward, things will start to occur that will help you. But most of us are so good at justifying not walking forward, right? We're so good at all the reasons why it's pointless to walk forward until we know how it's going to work out. Or, I walked forward once. My cat died. I'm not doing that again, right? We have all these amazing, reasonable reasons for not engaging with genius because we don't see it's reliable. But it's more than reliable. It's alive. It's life itself. It's not static. It's not fixed. Very often people will have an insight and they'll suddenly go, oh, I just need to chill. And it'll work. Right? Something that they know would have turned into a fight with their partner doesn't. But instead of recognizing that that's a living wisdom that can be tapped into at any time, they go, oh, must remember, when in fight, count to 10 first. And then that's how we start developing the rules for how to live successfully in the world. And we just keep collecting rules, which is the exact opposite of genius. It's the fruit of genius, maybe, but it's like I use this analogy, and I've learned to be a little cautious with it because this is LA and people don't like dairy. But just kind of roll with me, you know? It's a dairy analogy, okay? But it's like genius is this magical cow. Right? My wife grew up on a farm, and you know the best milk was fresh from the cow. Right? It wasn't pasteurized, homogenized, bottled, kept, stored. It was fresh. It was alive. And And that wisdom, that living wisdom, that real-time responsive intelligence is exactly what we need in the moment. It gives us exactly what we need. But sort of for efficiency's sake, we start storing it up. Oh, that was really good milk. That was a great batch of milk. Let me keep that in the fridge or freeze it for later. So if I need milk later, I've got it. Or we don't even think to freeze it, and we just keep going back to it, not noticing it that it's gone off. And it starts to turn a little green and taste bad and smell bad, but we're like, no, this milk saved me 30 years ago. I'm going to go to it. But we just don't understand that there's fresh milk. You can go back to the cow. Or we fall in love with our neighbor's milk, right? Do you see that guy over there? Man, his milk's reached milk. Oprah's had his milk on her show, right? You know, that must be great milk. I want that milk. Well, it might be great milk, but it was great milk for them. We all have access to the same cow. So that's what we're going to be exploring over the next few days is how does this show up in our world? How do we start to get eyes for it, notice it more, relax into it more, let it do its thing more in our worlds? And what is it? How do we miss it? Like, what are the gopher holes that we keep sticking our head down and just totally missing the gopher? What are those avenues, those habitual thought patterns, those habitual ways of using the mind that we get caught up in that just distract us every time? Because once you start to catch wise to those, they won't pull you in the same way. Once you start recognizing, oh, that's not what I thought it was. I thought that was the news. That's The Onion. Right? Like, you know The Onion online satire magazine? So I had this one friend, and actually, Davey, I don't remember if I ever sent you. So he would send me these news stories, and he would be appalled, and they were always satirical, and he never noticed. I'm like, did you read about this? Did you read about this? You know, Trump has ordered all chickens to be deported. I was like, dude, I just don't think that's, you know, and then, you know, you look at the source and it's like, yeah, okay, it's from that. Or he actually sent me one once, and it was a news report of an Australian submarine commander, and it was the old train sketch that you and Tom used to do, but set in an Australian submarine. And so it was an old comedy sketch that I happened to recognize because a couple of my friends used to do it. And he sent it to me as like, my God, have you seen what's going on in the Australian Navy? Right, now it's funny when we see it, but we're doing it all the time with our own thinking. We're going, did you see how that person looked at me? Right? Did you see? More proof people like me are never going to amount to anything. Right? Did you see yet another example of why I'm doomed? Right? It's funny when we see it in other people. And actually, it's funny when we see it in ourselves, once we see it for what it is. And so that's the game. And the way that we're going to do that is, so you signed up for something. I don't know if you know this, but you signed up for something, the subtitle of which was 3 Days of Loving Disruption. Now let me explain what that actually meant, right? What that meant is that everything that we're going to be doing comes from, as best we can, genuine love and care. Like, we actually like people. That's why we do this. And part of what I've seen in 30 years of working with people is that if nobody disrupts the gopher holes, they just keep going down them. Now, the dogs don't like it when I try and pull them out of a gopher hole, right? They'll sometimes even bark at me. You know, Pepper, when he was young, actually would try and bite me. But it was okay, because I got it. Like, he just was so fixated on the gopher hole that he totally lost sight of the gopher. So these exercises that we're going to be doing, these games we're going to be playing, and we will be, are designed to be fun, but they're also designed knowing that they're probably going to send you down your favorite gopher holes. So I'm just kind of basically saying, when at some point in the next 3 days you're hating me, hating the program, designing bad Yelp reviews in your head, I did warn you. But I'm also going to say, if you stick with it, and you will, it's not that hard, the rewards are way beyond what you could imagine right now. Because to live from the best we have inside us, to live in tune with the infinite part of ourselves, to live in sync, in harmony with the genius that we are, the intelligence that we are, the love that we are, the aliveness that we are, to live from that place, to come from that place more of the time, that's what a wonderful life is made of. And sometimes that wonderful life will look like what other people think a wonderful life is made of, what we think a wonderful life is made of. When The Secret first came out, I remember meeting so many people who met their ex-partners through it. Because they would visualize the form that they wanted. And it would go, oh, and they'd find it. They'd find the 6'5", blue-eyed, handsome millionaire. It turned out he was a right? And that's the thing, is we get enamored of the form we think our lives should take. Well, my business was like this, and my relationships like this, and my health like this. Yeah, cool, maybe sometimes. And that won't have a damn thing to do with your happiness. Because that comes from our connection to this. That comes from our awakeness to this. And so, Genius Catalyst, it's just to spark it, to ignite it, to wake us up to it, to wake it up inside us, and then to see what is it like to live in the world more and more from that place. Anyone in the wrong room?